A lot of musicians in the industry, man, have faced a lot of ups and downs and a lot of tragedies on their road to success. One minute you can be happy with fame and fortune, the next minute it can all be taken from you. Like country singer Reba McEntire, she lost 7 of her band members and her tour manager in a plane crash. Otis Redding and his band, the Barcades, died in a plane crash. The rock band Leonard Skinner, their plane ran out of fuel and crashed, killing 3 members and their road manager. The R&B group High Five, they faced a lot of crazy stuff and tragedies on their journey, in which some say that band High Five was cursed. And there was a lot more groups who dealt with that kind of thing. But one group that I feel that faced a lot of tragedies and who I felt was also one of the most underrated groups is the group called Heatwave. Lead singer Johnnie Wilder had a voice like no other. When the movie House Party played that song Always and Forever, in the scene with Martin Lawrence slow dancing with that girl, that's been one of my favorite songs ever since. Johnnie Wilder was a great singer, y'all. His falsetto sounded like he should have been singing with the Delphonics or the Temptations or something. Steve Russell from the R&B group Troop named him as one of his top 5 R&B singers of all time. Heatwave, they don't get mentioned enough when it comes to the top R&B and funk bands. A lot of people forget about Johnnie Wilder and Heatwave. They were dope on stage, and he was the heart and soul of that band. Plus, he came from Ohio, which is the home of funk. Ohio got some of the greatest singers and musicians that ever touched the microphone and hit the stage. Google it. Google it and see how many talented artists came from Ohio. But Heatwave music run would have been a lot longer if it wasn't for the tragedies they went through. Especially Johnnie Wilder and what had happened to him, man. So let's get to the story, right? Now, Johnnie Wilder Jr. was born July 3rd, 1949 in Dayton, Ohio. He was the oldest of 5 kids from his parents, his mother Lucille and his father Johnnie Wilder Sr., who at once upon a time had his own club. Now, growing up, Johnnie grew up listening to a lot of jazz music because his father loved jazz music. And he can sing too. His father could sing too. They also would sing in church. By high school, their parents had sent them to an all-boys Catholic school. And their mother paid their tuition by working at the school. But, him and his brother Keith became very popular for their dancing and singing talent. And, they were winning a lot of awards there. Now, after graduating high school, he went to study music at Central State University. And he also majored in math and minored in gymnastics because his dream was to go to the U.S. Olympics. So after graduating college in 1969, Johnnie, he got married to his high school sweetheart, Rosalind, and she had went to the Army. So he also joined the Army to be closer to her. That's his wife now, so he joined the Army. And they ended up stationed in West Germany. So once they got stationed in Germany, Johnnie started playing with some local bands there, like the Kashmirs, the Soul Sessions, the Noblemen, just to entertain the soldiers on base. But then he got out of the Army. He was discharged and decided to stay in Germany. Plus, him and his wife gave birth to a baby girl, and that's when he formed a group called Johnnie Wilder and the Chicago Heatwave. And some of the members were the guitarist Jesse Witten, who was from Chicago, bass guitarist Mario Mentesi, who was from Switzerland, drummer Ernest Berger, who was from Czechoslovakia, and songwriter and slash keyboardist Rod Temperon. Now, if y'all don't know who Rod Temperon is, put it like this. He later on would write these songs for Michael Jackson: Thriller, Off the Wall, and Rock With You. But, we'll get to that later. But see how now, look, how Johnny found Rod Temperon, right? Rod had actually put an ad in the newspaper that he was looking for work as a keyboard player. That's how Johnny found him. Wow. He hit the jackpot finding Rod Temperon, putting him in the group, man. That's crazy. But anyway, so once he got the group all together, Johnny, coming from the military, military background, he ran the band like a military drill sergeant. He was the leader. He had rules. Johnny had rules and everything, and you had to abide by them. So, they started doing a bunch of gigs all around Germany, and they started to get noticed. But then in 1977, his guitarist, Jesse Witten, ended up getting murdered. He went back to, Jesse Witten was from Chicago, so he went back home to visit family for Christmas, and he had got into it or something, and he ended up getting stabbed to death. And that's when Johnny replaced him with his younger brother, Keith Wilder, because Keith at the time was making a name for himself with his band back home in Ohio. But Johnny convinced him to join the band, come to Germany and join the band. And he also brought in Billy Jones, who played guitar, because Eric Johns had left the group by that time. And once the new lineup was ready, that's when Johnny decided to move everybody to London for a better opportunity on getting a record deal. So now in London, they started landing gigs everywhere, and they became so hot that they ended up getting a record deal with GTO Records, who at the time, GTO Records at the time had Donna Summer, the disco queen Donna Summer was there, and Billy Ocean was also on the label. So once they signed and changed the name just to Heatwave, they hooked up with producer Barry Blue, and the rest is history. And on June 15th, 1976, they released their debut album titled Too Hot to Handle in the UK. The album was first released in the UK first. And then the following year, on May 30th, 1977, they released it in the US. And once they released it in the US, they took the world by storm. Even though, the record label didn't put their faces on the front cover, because I guess there was a multiracial mixed band or whatever. Everybody came from different backgrounds, so I guess the label felt that they wouldn't be received that well. They did have a group picture on the back of the album cover. But anyway, when they released the single called Boogie Nights set the dance floors on fire, especially in the disco clubs. Boogie Nights hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, and number 2 on the UK singles chart, number 1 in New Zealand, and was certified double platinum, selling over 2 million copies. Boogie Nights was a big song, y'all. And look, in 1997, the movie called Boogie Nights came out, which was about porn actor John Holmes starring Mark Wahlberg, who played Dirk Diggler. They wanted to use Heatwave's song as the theme song to the movie, but Johnny refused because he was a born-again Christian at that time and said that the song was about dancing, not pornography. Something else? Even Mark Wahlberg said in an interview that he's asking God to forgive him for that role because he is a devout Catholic, father of 4 kids, and he said that movie was a poor choice. Wow. But anyway, so the song Boogie Nights, though, was big, nominated for a Grammy for Best R&B Performance by a duo or group with vocals, but they ended up losing to The Best of My Love by The Emotions. But then, they released another single called Always and Forever, which hit number 18 on the US Billboard Hot 100, number 2 on the US Billboard R&B chart, and that single went certified platinum, selling over 1 million copies. That's the joint right there, Always and Forever. I told you, every time I hear that song, I think about the movie House Party, where Martin Lawrence was slow dancing and singing to that girl. That was crazy. And you know what? It's also, Always and Forever is also a great wedding song too. A lot of people get married to that song. And Luther Vandross remade it back in 1994 and was nominated for a Grammy, but he ended up losing it to Babyface song, When Can I See You Again? But anyway, everybody loved that song. Even legendary artist Johnny Mathis did a cover of it in 2008. Essence magazine in 2009 had that song on their list of the 25 best slow jams of all time, and I agree. I agree with that list. When they recorded that song Always and Forever in the studio, they say the studio was packed with a full audience, and Johnny did the song in one take. Wow. Unbelievable. Johnny Wilder, man, something special, man. You know another song off that album, that Too Hot to Handle album, that a lot of rappers had sampled was the song called Ain't No Half Steppin'. You know, Big Daddy Kane took it, and Dougie Fresh took it, and De La Soul also sampled it for their song Ego Trippin'. I always wondered where that sample came from, too. But overall, that Too Hot to Handle album went certified double platinum. That's kind of rare for a group first album to go double platinum like that. And you know, with the success of that first album, they started touring everywhere. They had overseas on lock down there. They had overseas lock. And Johnny and Keith had told the other members, though, in order to be good in America, they needed to practice and rehearse more. Because, see, the other band members were not from the U.S. Johnny knew the competition was crazy in America because, first of all, he came from Ohio, which was a pool of talented musicians. And this was the late 70s. When they was hot, you had songs out like Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, Brick House by the Commodores, It's Ecstasy When You Lay Next to Me by Barry White, Gotta Give It Up by Marvin Gaye, Thelma Houston was popping, Stevie Wonder, and the list goes on. I didn't even really name all the disco artists that was popping at that time, like the Village People, Gloria Gaynor, Casey and the Sunshine Band, and many more. But the thing about Heatwave though was their stage show. Keith and Johnny, man, when they got on stage, they was jumping, doing a robot, flipping off stages, swinging microphones and everything. Go back and look at one of their shows on YouTube. They were wild, man. Now, the album, the touring, everything was successful with that first album. It went on tour in America, UK, tearing up the charts. Now it was time to start working on the second album. And guitarist Roy Carter had joined the group by then. And in April 1977, they released their second album titled Central Heating in the UK first. Like I said, they released it in the UK first, and then they released it on March 31st, 1978 in the USA. And the single called The Groove Line hit number 12 in the UK singles chart, number 7 in the Billboard Hot 100, and number 3 on the US Billboard R&B charts, and was certified platinum, selling over 1 million copies. That's another song they put out that sold over 1 million copies. I remember hearing that Groove Line song on a movie called South Central. OG Bobby Johnson. I don't know if y'all seen that. That was a great movie too. And the song Groove Line was a great song. Keith and Johnny voices together blended so well together, man. Now here's the crazy part though, right? The group, like I said, the group always had first dibs on songs from songwriter Rod Temperon. And Johnny, you know, him being a leader of Heatwave, he turned down some classic songs that Rod Temperon presented to them first, man. Check this out. They had the song Rock With You that Rod Temperon ended up giving to Michael Jackson. They turned that Rock With You song down. Oh my God. So he gave it to Michael Jackson, which became a #1 hit. Actually, the song was actually offered to Karen Carpenter, singer Karen Carpenter first, but she turned it down too. Michael made it a hit. And look, another song Johnny turned down was Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. That's crazy, man. But you know, Rod Temperon had to quit. He ended up quitting the band Heatwave because he didn't like performing he really liked being in the studio and writing songs. And that's when he had got with Quincy Jones. But you know, he still wrote songs for Heatwave too. Even though he left the group, he was still writing songs for Heatwave. But then, right before Christmas in 1978, more tragedy would hit the group when bass guitarist Mario Mattesi was stabbed by his girlfriend after they had an argument. And he ended up in a coma for weeks and permanently disabled. Now look, the story goes with that whole incident. They had went to a party in London that Elton John had threw, and Mario Mattesi and his girlfriend had got into it. So she left the party. So when he got home, she was doing something in the kitchen and she had a knife in her hand, and she somehow ended up stabbing him right in the heart. Wow. So he was rushed to the hospital where his heart stopped beating for 6 minutes, which also caused a blood clot that went from his heart to his brain. I mean, he was messed up pretty bad after he awoke from a coma after 5 weeks. He got out the coma after 5 weeks to find out that he could no longer play or sing. He was blind, mute, paralyzed, and he would never, ever play in the group again. Wow. He had to learn how to walk, talk all over again, y'all. That's crazy. But you know, the good thing is, years later, he made a good recovery, regained his eyesight, and he started writing books and became a spiritual teacher. And he said to this day, he doesn't remember nothing that happened that day. Still to this day, he don't even know what happened. So now, after losing that band member, Mario Mattesi, Heatwave would face more tragedy. Because on February 29th, 1979, Johnnie ended up being paralyzed from the neck down from a car accident. Now, the story goes, they was working on their third album, so Johnnie decided to take a break from recording and head back to his hometown in Ohio to see his family. So now back in Ohio, on that day, he took his wife's brother, the 12-year-old brother, somewhere for some musical lessons or something, when all of a sudden, a van ran a stop sign and crashed right into them. The van broadsided him, which knocked the car over the curb, then into a fence, and then into a tree. Now, his wife's brother that was in the car with him at the time wasn't seriously hurt, but the driver of that van that hit them ended up dying the next day. And Johnnie ended up breaking his neck. His spinal cord was severed, which left him paralyzed from the neck down and never to walk again. Man, that's sad, man. He was in the hospital for about a year, even though doctors at first only gave him a week to live, but he beat those odds. You know, Johnnie said it was rough at first being a quadriplegic. He was a C4 quad, which means paralyzed from the neck down. And, you know, he became depressed and wanted to die when he couldn't move his body, but he got over it when he realized he still had his voice. He still had his voice, though. You know, he just practiced and mastered his singing. His voice was still there. Plus, he had a wheelchair. He had a wheelchair that was so advanced with technology at that time. That helped him out, too. And, you know, he got back in the group, but they just added another singer who was J.D. Nicholas in his place whenever they would perform. But Johnnie was still the boss, though, of the group. He was still the boss, the lead singer in the studio. But now he would be more on the business side. He would book the shows and everything. He was just doing more of that kind of stuff. But, you know, J.D. Nicholas really didn't. The only thing about J.D. Nicholas, he didn't have the dancing skills like Johnnie had. Like I said earlier, Johnnie would be flipping and jumping off stage and everything. But J.D. Nicholas, he was a great singer. And he would later on leave Heatwave and replace Lionel Richie when he left the Commodores for a solo career. But anyway, now, on April 27th, 1979, they released their third album titled Hot Property, which did end up going certified gold. And, you know, they had some good songs on there, like Eyeballing, Razor Blades, One Night 10. Now, on November 21st, 1980, they released their fourth album titled Candles. And they had a couple songs on there I like The Gangsters of the Groove and Posing Till Closing. After that, on March 18th, 1982, that's when singer Teddy Pendergrass was in a near fatal car accident that put him in a wheelchair for life. And you know something? Teddy Pendergrass record label at the time had asked Johnny to come and talk to Teddy to uplift him because Teddy was having a hard time dealing with it. Teddy wanted to commit suicide, all that stuff too. But you know, they wanted Johnny to come talk to Teddy and you know, explain to him how to get over it. And Johnny helped him through it. Johnny helped him through because he went through the same thing 3 years before. And him and Teddy P became real good friends. Teddy even wrote about that in this book too, about their relationship. They was real good friends and how Johnny helped them. Now, on May 28th, 1982, they released their fifth album titled Current, but right after that album, their record label ended up dropping them. So, you know, they dropped them. I guess they probably felt that, you know, Johnny, the main star of the group, couldn't do what he used to do anymore. So I guess they said just let him go. They let the group go. And once they lost that record deal, the group just kind of went their separate ways. That's when Rod Temperon, you know, he was already writing songs for Michael Jackson and stuff. He continued to write songs for other artists. He did Michael Jackson's Thriller song, and he wrote Lady in My Life. Wow, that's crazy. That Thriller album is the best-selling album of all time. He also wrote Rod Temperon also wrote Baby Come to Me by Patty Austin and James Ingram. He worked with George Benson, Quincy Jones, Michael McDonald, Rufus, and many more. And later on, he also helped write The Secret Garden on Quincy Jones' album. Wow, that's crazy. Now, in 1988, Johnny started his own record label called Shalonda Records, and he released his first solo album titled My Goal, which was an a cappella album. You know, he got more into his spiritual side on that album. But I must say, it was a beautiful album, y'all. Y'all should check it out. He let the world know he still got them vocals, man. Check that album out called My Goal by Johnny Wilder. Now, that same year in 88 though, 1988, Keith decided to do another Heatwave album with some new members. And they released the album called The Fire. In 1989, Johnny and Keith released an album together called Sound of Soul. In 1994, Johnny started teaching students about the music industry at Ohio Central State University. And the kids there, all the students, they loved Johnny there. He was teaching them the real thing about the music industry. In 1996, he released his second solo album titled One More Day, which was an a cappella album, which sounded great too. That was a good album too. And you know, Keith continued to performing, and he had put the group back together with some old and new members, and he also put out a live album. But then on May 13th, 2006, Johnny Wilder died in his sleep at his house, y'all. He died in his sleep. You know, I think about what if Johnny would have never been in that accident, because he was in his prime, man. He was rolling. I know, I think about that sometimes. Like Teddy P too. Teddy Pendergrass too, man. Like these guys were just getting started. They was just so talented, man. What if that would never happen to them, man? Even Tammy Terrell, she would never die. Like, just think about that sometime. What would he be at? Now, Keith Wilder continued doing shows until he was forced to come off of the road after suffering a stroke. Keith Wilder, you know, he ended up passing away too, man, in 2017, which was a shock to his family. You know, they claimed the last couple of days he was happy, dancing, laughing, and in great spirits. You know, he had gone to a concert and everything just seemed just fine. They say he took a nap and didn't wake up. Wow. But, you know, he passed away, man. Rest in peace to Keith Wilder too. Rod Temperon died in 2016. You know, he wrote all them hits for Michael Jackson and Heatwave. He died. Rest in peace to him too. But man, Johnny Wilder though, man, what a voice. What a voice. He's truly missed. He was 56 years old. Rest in peace, Johnny Wilder.